Hello and welcome back. Over the last year or so, it's become quite obvious that this is very much a retro channel. My most successful and popular videos appear to be ones where I do a look back at a classic TV series or a classic old film. And obviously that's my sort of niche. My audience are more mature viewers and they seem to enjoy me talking about old film and TV. And I'm happy to do so because I love that sort of stuff. I enjoy researching it and I enjoy talking about it. I did a video on Land of the Giants, Irwin Allen's show, end of last year, which did quite well. And I do like Irwin Allen shows, although they have aged somewhat and they don't have the rewatchability perhaps of some other shows from the 60s and 70s, which perhaps have a bit more to them, because Irwin Allen's shows were a little bit, what you see is what you get. There were no subtleties to them. They were big and brash and silly and loud. And no matter how good the concept for the shows were, things like Lost in Space, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, they sort of drifted into juvenilia and silly monsters and things, which is entertaining when you're a child, but when you look back now, you sort of think, yeah, this isn't very good really, is it? I've often thought that Irwin Allen's shows, they are titles that are quite well known, they were very successful in their day, and you'd think, well, it's a bit odd that nobody's plundered that back catalogue a bit more and done something with it for a modern audience. We had Netflix's reboot of Lost in Space a few years ago. That ran for 3 10-part seasons, I'm thinking, and it wasn't great. It looks as if things are happening that we may well be getting very soon an Irwin Allen verse. Let's talk. Hello, welcome back to my world of stuff. Yeah, an Irwin Allen verse seems like it's going to become a very real thing in the near future. A year or so's time, we might see the first fruits of all this, and it's interesting. I mentioned the Lost in Space series before the credits, which I've never really got into. I mean, I really wanted to like it, and I felt that it sort of went too far in the other direction from the original Lost in Space, which was silly and knockabout in places. And we had that film in the late 90s that starred Joey out of Friends and William Hurt and Gary Oldman as Dr. Smith, which started off quite well but lost its way badly in the second half. And then we had the Netflix series that I said that didn't quite work for me. I mean, it did the obvious thing that resurrected shows will do these days with gender flipping and changing the identities and personalities of characters. So Dr. Smith became a woman in the new Netflix series. The dynamic with the Robinson family changed slightly in that the mother was the strong character who made the decisions, and the husband, played by Toby Stephens, I think, bit of a wimp, downtrodden, and you sort of roll your eyes a bit and think, it's a bit lazy, isn't it? Just flick a switch, just swap characters round, just to appease what they perceive to be part of the modern audience. I don't think that long-term fans of these shows really appreciate that sort of stuff, because they like the old shows, faults and all, and they want to see them remade in the style and wearing the skin of the originals. And I just think that there's this need, this craving to sort of satiate what they perceive to be cultural demands. I don't think people wanted to see John Robinson downtrodden and cowering before his wife, who said, do this, do that, and it wasn't quite like that, of course. And I think they wanted to see Dr. Smith as this devious, scheming Jonathan Harris type, but without the comedy. And there were design issues. The robot was this big CGI AI type thing. Didn't have the charm of the original robot. Now, obviously you have to update these things, you have to make them more modern, but I think there are ways of doing it that are a bit more respectful to the original, rather than just, no, we're going to make it more modern by doing A, B and C, the obvious things that everybody does. Anyway, that's where we are in the past with Irwin Allen shows. It's been announced today, reported by Deadline, that Akiva Goldsman and Legendary Pictures are crafting a new unified vision for titles that Legendary Television has the rights to for Irwin Allen's oeuvre. Obviously, Lost in Space is off the table because it's been done, but they are taking a look at Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, The Time Tunnel, and Land of the Giants. Land of the Giants, as I said, I did a video on it. It's one of my favourite shows, and it is one of those shows that I can go back to because it doesn't descend into the silliness that bedeviled Lost in Space and Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. And frankly, it's not as slightly dull as The Time Tunnel. And I love that sort of concept of big people and little people, the borrowers and all that sort of stuff. But I think Land of the Giants is such a great idea. I've always thought it's ripe for a reimagining with the special effects techniques that are around today. You can do some stunning stuff, with CGI, and Land of the Giants did it brilliantly. They did a really good job with high camera angles looking down at the little people, low camera angles looking down at the giants, big giant props, that big giant hand that will come in every now and again. It was an expensive series to make, and it looks it. When you watch it now and you think, this has got some heft, it's got some money thrown at it. And I've always thought, there's a potential here for a remake, and it seems as if it's going to happen. The article from Deadline says that somebody called John Jashney serves as executive producer, guiding the effort to reintroduce these popular franchises to a new generation, with Derek Thielges co-producing. I don't know these people, they're obviously industry names. What's interesting is that it's not just a vague, they might bring back Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, there are talks about it. There are people named involved in it, so obviously this has been announced, but it's been underway and in preparation for some time. There have been talks, presumably it's a little way down the pre-production process. It's more than just a pipe dream that, we're going to do Land of the Giants again. It never happens, because we hear this sort of stuff all the time. Remakes of this, remakes of that, and they either never happen or they do and they're crap. I hope that doesn't happen with these, because I think that there's potential here to do interesting, serious science fiction TV based on these great ideas that were not always treated at their best, because I think Irwin Allen, once his shows were up and running, he just wanted to get episodes out, churning out 30 episodes a year or whatever it was. So there was a lot of reuse of props, a lot of comedy and silliness going on, because it was just an easy way to fill an hour. And I think with Irwin Allen, much as he was very imaginative and very creative and came up with his ideas, I don't think he respected them. They were just properties that he invented and then just spurged them out. Quality control was quite low. So it talks about the 3 series, and I will go through the press release, such as it is, or the news story. Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea premiered in 1964 on ABC, based on the 1961 film. It ran for 4 seasons, starred Richard Basehart as Admiral Harry Nelson in the leading role, as well as David Hedison, Robert Dowdall, Henry Culkey, and others. The series was an underwater adventure that followed the nuclear submarine Seaview, led by Nelson and Crane. It is a good fun series. I mean, the Seaview is a formidable piece of kit. I mean, it's a really nice, sleek, super sophisticated nuclear submarine, and it looks great. And they had a flying sub which came up from underneath, which took them up onto the land. The problem with the show is that the first series in black and white was quite gritty, and it was a lot of espionage stories and much more grounded. And then it became Monster of the Week, crazy costumes, prehistoric creatures and giant fish and so on. All silly monsters cobbled from the Irwin Allen wardrobe, presumably, because you'd see a lot of these costumes recycled and reused in different shows. I mean, we've had other submarine shows. We had Sequest DSV, which, despite a couple of reshuffles and reboots and reimaginings and format updates for its couple of seasons, never took off. So I don't know that submarine show has that much potential, but Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea managed 4 years. I'm not a big fan of submarine things there. I find them a bit claustrophobic by their nature. But I think an imaginative story done well with good characters and good scripts could work. But let's not have Admiral Harriet Nelson. Let's stick to the originals if we can. Irwin's third release was The Time Tunnel, a time travel adventure series starring James Darren, Robert Colbert. Premiered on ABC in the fall of 1966. It only ran for one 30-episode season, and it followed the 2 scientists, Doug Phillips and Anthony Newman, who accidentally jumped through time as those left behind in the operation, I think it's called Project TikTok, attempt to bring them back to the present. There was an attempt in 2002 by Fox to reboot it, but apparently there was only a pilot made. Again, this is interesting. I love time travel, big time travel fan, and this started off really well. If you watch the first episode of Time Tunnel, again, the money's on screen with the location filming out in the desert. They go to this underground massive complex that's created by glass shots and so on. It looks really formidable. And the big time tunnel thing itself, which is this big black and white sort of spiral that disappears into the distance. And these 2 characters step into it. And they travel to various points in history, and there's a couple of science fiction-y, more sort of space-based science fiction things. And it was a good fun show, but the problem was, watching it now, many of the episodes, when they travel back in time, to recreate the time periods, Irwin Allen borrowed lots of stock footage from feature films. So they travel back to a certain period in history, the Wild West, and you get a big scene of cowboys and Indians, and then you'd cut to a soundstage, and you'd see the 2 lead characters, and suddenly two cowboys would come up, they'd have a fight with them. You'd have to make that leap in your imagination that that is connected to the stock footage you've seen. And the use of stock footage was quite obvious because there was often a difference in quality between the stock footage and the new live footage. And I think every episode just had too much of this going on. I haven't seen the time travel for a long time, so perhaps I'm being unfair to it. It's a great concept because time travel stories are always fascinating and there's always an audience for them. We're all fascinated by this idea of stepping back into the past and reliving the past. I think more so than stepping into the future because the past is a foreign country and we'd all like to go there. Well, certain parts. I suppose there's potential, and certainly we won't have the stock footage issue now because they can do incredible things these days. So, yeah, I think if you put a new twist to it, because time travel, every angle of time travel has probably been done over the years. And in fact, the time tunnel itself, interestingly, and I don't know how that's going to be affected by this, that's been licensed to Big Finish, who do the Doctor Who audios. They've just brought out or are bringing out a box set, sort of a sequel, which doesn't involve the main characters other than I think there's some sort of strand that something they've done in the past has affected the modern day because the timeline has changed, which is an interesting idea. Whether that's going to be compromised now by this new announcement, I don't know, but it'll be interesting to see what they can do with the time tunnel. Land of the Giants, of course, is the one that particularly interests me. Created by Allen as his fourth series, premiered on ABC in the fall of 1968, ran for 2 seasons. I believe it was originally a mid-season replacement, as they call them in America, where they launch a show, and if it doesn't work, they have another show that they can throw in that slot, hoping it will do better. And I think that's what happened with Land of the Giants. They made a certain batch of episodes. It was going to be a mid-season replacement. Then they held it back till the following season when they made the whole season of episodes. Starred Gary Conway as Steve Burton, worked alongside Don Matheson, Stephen Angrim, Don Marshall, Deanna Lund, Kurt Kasner. Set in 1983, the series follows the suborbital space vehicle, the Spindrift, whose crew shrunk after getting caught up in a sandstorm. Excuse me. Okay, yeah, I've just read this blind. They weren't shrunk after getting caught up in a sandstorm. They were transported to a planet where everybody was 12 times larger than they were, or when they went through a wormhole. Journalism standards are shocking these days. Anyway, I'm interested by this because Land of the Giants is my favourite of the 4, and as I said, I felt that it kept a fairly serious tone throughout. There were a couple of slightly more knockabout episodes, but it was a really good series, and visually, I think, as I said, I think it still stands up. So there is potential there. Let's look at who's doing it, though. Akiva Goldsman. Now, he's a name that I know very well. I've seen him in credits of things, but don't follow him particularly. But he is an experienced hand, shall we say, but his work, I think, is quite divisive. I mean, it was ever thus with people working in science fiction and film and TV. There's always people who think, he's crap, he's brilliant. It's always the way. Science fiction fans are like that. It's one thing or the other. There's no middle ground. But he won an Oscar in 2001 for A Beautiful Mind, which also won the Best Picture at the Oscars. For sci-fi fans, he wrote the scripts for I, Robot, which I think is a decent film. I Am Legend, the adaptation of Richard Matheson's story. He also wrote the Da Vinci Code and its sequel, Angels and Demons. TV, he's worked on Fringe. That's a science fiction series which is actually on ITVX now, which I've never really explored, and I think I probably should because I know it's quite well respected. So that's sort of in my back rear view mirror, something to watch at some point. And he worked on recently Star Trek projects like Star Trek Picard, the very acclaimed and very enjoyable Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Further back in his CV, you'll find that he wrote the script for Batman Forever and Batman and Robin. Never mind, we all have off days. He's an experienced name, but he is sort of divisive. He's not a guarantee of quality. And I think we all want the right people to be working on these beloved old projects. And I hope he brings his A game to it rather than his Batman and Robin game. We're going to have an Irwin Allen verse, which is interesting. Well, I mean, we're not short of science fiction these days. And whilst my preference is for new things, I'm quite happy for things from the past, especially things that you have a fondness for. As I said, you look back at these shows now and they creak and they don't have much sophistication in the storytelling, but they're colourful and they're vivid and the core ideas are so good. This is why these things are revisited, because they are great ideas at the heart. And I hope that people working on these shows will remember what made them work and keep that, and with a bit of new sophistication in the storytelling and the characters, and don't put front and centre, oh, we must represent this, we must represent that. Just remember what these shows were, what made them work then. There are ways of representing on film and television that don't involve being lazy and go, let's make this character a bloke, let's make this character a woman. There are ways of doing it that are a bit more subtle than that, and I hope that these people will think of that. I hope that we're moving away from that lazy way of modernising shows and being a bit more reasonable in the way we approach our stories, because sometimes you do think, oh, you do roll your eyes. Anyway, that's coming. An Irwin Allen verse. It's an interesting prospect. So, as I said, it looks as if it's some way down the line because there are names attached. And these things are not in production yet, but they're heading that way. So I'll be interested to see what happens. My hopes probably aren't that high. But certainly Land of the Giants, that is a sort of cherished show. And it suffers from some of the problems that you had in those shows. But it's not going to be like the original. Can't be. But it will look fantastic, and it just depends on the scripts and the characters and the actors, so we'll see. Right, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this little news video. I thought this was something worth looking at in depth, because these are shows that sort of benchmark American genre shows from the 60s, that period when TV, and particularly American television, was really big and colourful and doing crazy things, and I think it's an interesting prospect to have these shows back on our screen. So, hope you've liked the video. If you have, just press that subscribe button if you're new, if you're not a subscriber, because I will go back to these shows as we move forward and we eventually see them. So like and subscribe, leave a comment down below. What are your memories of the Irwin Allen shows? Lost in Space as well as Voyage, Time Tunnel and Land of the Giants. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think about the potential for this reboot. And until I see you next time, you just keep taking the stuff.